Good morning and welcome to another Crawford Cogitation. Today we're going to be looking at the idea of gasoline or plastic. Let's get started. The beginning of the conversation starts with this idea of paper or plastic. If you look at the data table that's listed here, it looks at total paper consumption by region, and this shouldn't surprise us from the values that we have seen with population increases. The Asian continent is actually increasing in paper consumption, and if you look at the use of paper being used, you can see that packaging material is actually on the increase, where the rest of it is either going down or staying pretty steady. In the conversations that we have in our communities, we're talking about the reuse of paper bags or the lifelong bags, or so the reusable ones. And the significance of this is how do you make the choice of what you're using when you go to the grocery store or any other store for that matter. Let's talk about what's in a plastic bag. There's actually three types of plastics that are used for bags. The first one is HDPE, which is high density polyethylene. This is actually a really strong polyethylene that actually allows you to carry many things. And this is what you see in the grocery store plastic bags. LDPE is the low density polyethylene, and it actually changes or is used more in the tearaway type bags that you have. They're not nearly as strong. And then you have the LLDPE, which is the linear low density polyethylene, which is the shiny pieces that you see in your clothing stores in the packaging that comes with it. The idea of paper or plastic, a shopping bag is actually recyclable, but the problem with it is that you can't usually recycle it in the same recycle bin that you do at your curbside. What you have to do is actually recycle it through the stores that you use them at. This is because you can't actually generate the same type of things with it, because once it's made into a plastic bag, it pretty much stays in a plastic bag, or it goes into a product that can be used in construction. So let's look at how much we waste in our society, because the reason why we look at plastic bags is what are they being used for. Plastics we end up using the most, and our society right now is using a lot of plastic. There you can see glass and cardboard comes into it, wood products, and then metals. But when you look at what we waste most, we're looking at 50% of the salad greens that we do, 25% of the fruits and vegetables, then bread, and then the bottom is the least wasted of meat and fish. And if you think about your refrigerator, that's probably true. Every day or every week when you have trash day, do your parents go through the refrigerator and throw away things that are old or have molded? What are the waste trends really in our communities? So if we look at it right now, the generation of waste is actually going up because population demands are going up. If you look at the blue line, that's showing you how much waste is increasing, but the orange line is actually showing you per capita. So each one of us individually are using less, but the total population increase is actually making the generation of waste more. And what many people don't realize is that the recycling rates have actually gone up since the 60s. So we keep on increasing. The blue line actually shows the total municipal solid waste recycling, and then the percent that's being recycled continues to go up too. And this has a lot to do with the programs that are introduced in elementary schools, because elementary students actually have a huge influence on what their parents do. But what's in our waste, if you look at it, we still have 27% of what we waste is actually paper. The yard trimmings is an interesting piece, because the yard trimmings are not technically supposed to go to the landfill, even though I see in my garbage truck all the time them picking up my yard waste and throwing them in the back of the truck with the same trash. The new mantra is really the idea about rethinking. You probably heard the idea of reduce, reuse, recycle. But the question is, how do we recycle, or how do we rethink the way we used it? And if you look at what's going on in grocery stores, you can see that they're moving to multi-use bags, so not the regular plastic bags. Our local community, the main grocers are doing that, and they're actually trying to incentivize you using reusable bags. The problem is, with the COVID-19 outbreak, we have now seen a move back to plastic bags. And the reason being is those multi-use bags should be cleaned all the time, but nobody can end up guaranteeing that they're clean when they bring them back into the store. So COVID-19 has actually increased the use of plastic bags once again. Take a moment and write any statements that you might think of from what we just talked about. Let's talk about wastewater here, just briefly. If you think about wastewater, everything that comes out of your house has to go somewhere. We've looked at these in different parts of the year, but if you think about it, you may have a septic tank if you live in more of a country setting, but most of us have city sewage. And the wastewater is actually taken to one of these blue locations. Right? These are wastewater treatment facilities that exist, and these wastewater treatment facilities actually deal with all of our waste that's going on. Here you can see a much closer view of what it is in central Ohio. So each community has it. If you look at Columbus, if you follow the 71 route down south, that's where all the wastewater goes. And there's other conversations that can be had around wastewater that we won't get into in this presentation. So we have wastewater, so that's all the liquids that we have coming out of our house. But now let's look at the municipal solid waste, so anything that would go to your curbside. These are solid waste facilities that exist in Ohio from the Ohio EPA. These have construction sites. They can actually be tire sites. They can end up being municipal waste sites. We have several different facilities right in central Ohio, and that has to do with the population center. Take a minute to write a thought. So what about all the bad stuff that we have in our society? How do we manage those pieces? There are actually landfills that are designed especially for hazardous waste. But if we look at what's happened over time, we look at this idea of brownfields. Brownfields are managed by the EPA, and anything that is a plus sign on this graphic is actually considered a brownfield, which means it's been contaminated at some point in time due to whatever was happening on the property. This is where we get the idea of Superfund sites and the National Priority List. The National Priority List is talking about the most major environmental catastrophes that have happened and how do we fund it to be able to clean it up to make the environment better. This is a list of the national priorities, and you can see here in Ohio we do have a couple. One is Air Force Plant 85. Air Force Plant 85 is over towards the airport. This has been part of the U.S. military services for since back to World War II. So there's been a lot of different things that have happened at this site, but it is considered a Superfund site, and we are working, or the EPA is working on cleaning it up. The cost of these cleanups are immense. Air Force Plant 85 costs $11.5 million so far, and expected additional costs is another $7 million. They say the completion date was 2017, but data at this point isn't clear on whether they have completed it. Which brings us to this idea of cradle to grave. What we need to do as a society is make sure that we track these hazardous waste from cradle to grave. So it goes from the material extraction to the processing of it, to the manufacturing, to the use, and then the waste management of it. This idea of cradle to grave is going to be more apparent because the uses of different things that we have in our society need to be identified, and we need to track the bad material that comes through. What questions do you still have that might be interesting based off of the information that you've just received? And what are the implications that we have in this environment? So the question I posed at the very beginning of gasoline or plastic, the question is how do we get rid of plastic? And plastic is actually a part of our lives. We've talked about this many times in the classroom environment. But the gasoline is actually where the product of plastic has come from. The ethyl in polyethylene is actually a gasoline byproduct. I hope you found this interesting, and we'll talk to you guys real soon.